I talked to a group of people the other day, and I said, if I gave you 100% certainty that you can achieve whatever you want to, would you do it? Everybody raised their hand. So what gets people? It's the uncertainty. What we do is we love to bury half of ourselves away. All the bad parts. We bury them in the attic. We bury them in the cellar. We bury them in the dungeon of our mind. We're afraid to go in there and figure the shit out. Figure the very things that we're afraid of. So we leave it alone. See, those places are scary. There's cobwebs. There's spiders. It's dark up there. So we don't go up there and figure it out. So we're always about 30, 40, 50% of ourselves. So what does that say about you? If you're not succeeding and you're not achieving, it's because you're afraid to go in that dark place to find yourself. Stay hard.
That's how I've lived my entire life. I don't know anything about that. But people go, man, you have such a strong will. It's something that you build. Like, I never forget, I was on a podcast one time, and this dude goes, you were blessed with a strong mind. Like, the hell are you talking about? I was blessed with a strong mind. That's something that you have to develop. You develop that over years, decades of suffering and going back into the suffering. That's why a lot of people who graduate Navy SEAL training, they want to know, like I talk about it very openly all the time. A lot of guys don't want to go back into that water. Don't want to go back into the hard stuff. Maybe not anything hard in life. Once you get through it, it's like you become a POW. Like, how many POWs you know want to go back to POW camp? None. When something sucks so bad in life, this is on this that we're talking about now, very few people want to go back. They're happy they graduated. I realized I'm the same way. I don't want to go back. I have to go back. I must go back. Because that is exactly where all the knowledge of my life exists, was back there, and what you're talking about. Well, I didn't know anything about this, but how I grew a will was constantly doing these things. To now, it's just life. I wake up, while it still sucks, it's just life. You don't sit back and like, oh my God, like, I have days I don't want to do it, but I know I'm going to do it. I know from years of just doing it. So that's beautiful, and this is why I came on here with you today, and I'm glad that you're talking about this, because human beings need to hear this. They need to stop hearing these hacks on this and that. There's no fucking hack, bro. There's no fucking hack. Yeah, you may this and that and saunas and this, and all this, yeah, it's great. There is no fucking life hack. To grow that thing, how do you grow it? Do it, and do it, and do it, and do it. That's the hack. The hack is gonna fucking suck. And that's what I realized. That's what I realized. Life, that's why I wanted to come on here today. I didn't want to come on here and talk about no fucking passion and purpose and how to get the fuck out of bed and how to hit a fucking alarm clock and all this catchphrase bullshit. Because that wasn't how I lived. That wasn't how I lived. I woke up like every human being does and goes, man, I'm a fucking piece of shit today. How the hell is this gonna work out for me? And you fight that, and you fight that. You don't override it. There's no override button. It's the conversation in your head. So how do you do that? We don't have enough of these conversations about the real conversation that every human being is having. And they have no idea how to get out of it, but they do. It's that shit right there, man. You gotta build your will. How do you build your will? Exactly what you said, man. Exactly what you said.
Your knee looks pretty bad, Goggins. No fucking shit, doc. With 2 days to go in walk week, I'd come by medical for a follow-up. The doctor rolled up my camo pants, and when he gave my right kneecap a gentle squeeze, pain seized my brain, but I couldn't show it. I was playing a role. I was the beat up, but otherwise healthy buzz student ready for the fight, and I couldn't so much as grimace to pull it off. I already knew the knee was f***ed, and that the odds of getting through another 5 months of training on one leg were low, but accepting another rollback meant enduring another hell week, and that was way too much to process. The swelling hasn't gone down much. How's it feel? The doctor was playing a role too. SEAL candidates had a don't ask, don't tell agreement with most of the medical staff at Naval Special Warfare Command. I wasn't about to make the doctor's job easier by revealing anything to him, and he wasn't going to take caution side and pull the ripcord on a man's dream. He lifted his hand and my pain faded. I coughed and pneumonia once again rattled in my lungs until I felt the cold truth of his stethoscope on my skin. Ever since Hell Week was called, I've been coughing up brown knots of mucus. For the first 2 days, I lay in bed day and night, spitting them into a Gatorade bottle, where I stored them like so many nickels. I could barely breathe and couldn't move much either. I may have been a bad motherfucker in Hell Week, but that shit was over, and I had to deal with the fact that the devil and those instructors branded me too. It's all right, Doc, I said, a little stiff is all. Time is what I needed. I knew how to push through pain, and my body had almost always responded with performance. I wasn't going to quit just because my knee was barking. It would come around eventually. The doc prescribed medicine to reduce the congestion in my lungs and sinuses and gave me some Motrin for my knee. Within 2 days, my breathing improved, but I still couldn't bend my right leg. This would be a problem. Of all the moments and buds that I thought could break me, a knot tying exercise never registered on my radar. Then again, this wasn't the fucking Boy Scouts. This was an underwater knot tying drill held in the 15-foot section of the pool. And while the pool didn't strike mortal fear into me like it once did, being negatively buoyant, I knew that any pool evolution could be my undoing, especially those that demanded treading water. Even before Hell Week, we'd been tested in the pool. We had to perform mock rescues on the instructors and do a 50-meter underwater swim without fins on a single breath. That swim started with a giant stride into the water, followed by a full somersault to siphon off any moment whatsoever. Then, without kicking off the side, we swam along the lane lines to the end of our 25-meter pool. On the far side, we were allowed to kick off the wall, then swim back. When I arrived at the 50-meter mark, I rose up and gasped for air. My heart hammered until my breath smoothed, and I grasped that I'd actually passed the first of a series of complicated underwater evolutions that were supposed to teach us to be calm, cool, and collected underwater on a breath hold. The knot tying evolution was next in the series, and it wasn't about our ability to tie various knots or a way to time our max breath hold. Sure, both skills come in handy on amphibian operations, but this drill was more about our capacity to juggle multiple stressors in an environment that's not sustainable for human life. Despite my health, I was heading into the drill with some confidence. Things changed when I started treading water. That's how the drill began, with 8 students strung out across the pool, moving our hands and legs like egg beaters. That's hard enough for me on 2 good legs, but because my right knee didn't work, I was forced to tread water with just my left. That spiked the degree of difficulty and my heart rate, which sapped my energy. Each student had an instructor assigned to them for this evolution, and Psycho Pete specifically requested me. It was obvious I was struggling, and Psycho and his bruised pride were hungry for a little payback. With each revolution of my right leg, shockwaves of pain exploded like fireworks. Even with Psycho eyeballing me, I couldn't hide it. When I grimaced, he smiled like a kid on Christmas morning. "Tie a square knot, then a bowline," he shouted. I was working so hard it was difficult to catch my breath, but Psycho didn't give two. Now, damn it. I gulped air, bent from the waist, and kicked down. There were 5 knots in the drill altogether, and each student was told to grab their 8-inch slice of rope and tie them off one at a time at the bottom of the pool. We were all allotted a breath in between, but could do as many as all 5 knots on a single breath. The instructor called out the knots, but the pacing was up to each student. We weren't allowed to use a mask or goggles to complete the evolution, and the instructor had to approve each knot with a thumbs up before we were permitted to surface. If they flashed a thumbs down instead, we had to retie that knot correctly, and if we surfaced before a given knot was approved, that meant failure and a ticket home. Once back at the surface, there was no resting or relaxing between tasks. Treading water was the constant refrain, which meant soaring heart rates and the continual burning up of oxygen in the bloodstream for the one-legged man. Translation: the dives were uncomfortable as hell, and blacking out was a real possibility. Psycho glared at me through his mask as I worked my knots. After about 30 seconds, he'd approved both and we surfaced. He breathed free and easy, but I was gasping and panting like a wet, tired dog. The pain in my knee was so bad, I felt sweat bead up on my forehead. When you're sweating in an unheated pool, you know shit's up. I was breathless, low on energy, and wanted to quit. But quitting this evolution meant quitting butts altogether, and that wasn't happening. Oh no. Are you hurt, Goggins? Did you get some sand in your pussy? Psycho asked. I'll bet you can't do the last 3 knots on one breath. He said it with a smirk, like he was daring me. I knew the rules. I didn't have to accept his challenge, but that would have made Psycho just a little too happy, and I couldn't allow that. I nodded and kept treading water, delaying my dive until my pulse evened out and I could score one deep, nourishing breath. Psycho wasn't having it. Whenever I opened my mouth, he splashed water in my face to stress me out even more. A tactic used when training, he started to panic. That made breathing impossible. Go under now or you fail. I had run out of time. I tried to gulp some air before my duck dive and tasted a mouthful of Psycho splash water. Instead, as I dove to the bottom of the pool on a negative breath hold. My lungs were damn near empty, which meant I was in pain from the jump. But I knocked the first one out in a few seconds. Psycho took his sweet time examining my work. My heart was thrumming like high alert Morse code. I felt it flip-flop in my chest, like it was trying to break through my rib cage and fly to freedom. Psycho stared at the twine, flipped it over, and perused it with his eyes and fingers before offering a thumbs up in slow motion. I shook my head, untied the rope, and hit the next one. Again, he gave it a close inspection while my chest burned and diaphragm contracted, trying to force air into my empty lungs. The pain level in my knee was at a 10. Stars gathered in my peripheral vision. Those multiple stressors had me teetering like a Jenga tower, and I felt like I was about to black out. If that happened, I'd have to depend on Psycho to swim me to the surface and bring me around. Did I really trust this man to do that? He hated me. What if he failed to execute? What if my body was too burned out that even a rescue breath couldn't rouse me? My mind was spun with those simple toxic questions that never go away. Why was I here? Why suffer when I could quit and be comfortable again? Why risk passing out or even death for a fucking knot drill? I knew that if I succumbed and bolted to the surface, my SEAL career would have ended then and there. But in that moment, I couldn't figure out why I ever gave a f. I looked over at Psycho. He held both thumbs up and sported a big, goofy smile on his face like he was watching a damn comedy show. His split second of pleasure in my pain reminded me of all the bullying and taunts I felt as a teenager, but instead of playing the victim and letting negative emotions sap my energy and force me to the surface of failure, it was as if a new light blazed in my brain that allowed me to flip that script. Time stood still as I realized for the first time that I'd always looked at my entire life, everything I'd been through, from the wrong perspective. Yes, all the abuse I'd experienced and the negativity I had to push through challenged me to the core. But in that moment, I stopped seeing myself as the victim of bad circumstance and saw my life as the ultimate training ground instead. My disadvantages had been callousing my mind all along and had prepared me for that moment in that pool with Psycho Pete. I remember my very first day in the gym back in Indiana. My palms were soft and quickly got torn up on the bars because they weren't accustomed to gripping steel. But over time, after thousands of reps, my palms built up a thick callus as protection. The same principle works when it comes to mindset. Until you experience hardships like abuse and bullying, failures and disappointments, your mind will remain soft and exposed. Life experience, especially negative experiences, helps callous the mind. But it's up to you where that callus lines up. If you choose to see yourself as a victim of circumstance into adulthood That callous will become resentment that protects you from the unfamiliar. It will make you too cautious and untrusting, and possibly too angry at the world. It will make you fearful of change and hard to reach, but not hard of mind. That's where I was as a teenager, but after my second hell week, I'd become someone new. I'd fought through so many horrible situations by then and remained open and ready for more. My ability to stay open represented a willingness to fight for my own life, which allowed me to withstand hailstorms of pain and use it to callous over my victim's mentality. That was gone, buried under layers of sweat and hard fucking flesh, and I was starting to callous over my fears too. That realization gave me the mental edge I needed to outlast Psycho Pete one more time, to show him he couldn't hurt me anymore. I smiled back, and the feeling of being on the edge of a blackout went away. Suddenly, I was energized. The pain faded, and I felt like I could stay under all day. Psycho saw that in my eyes. I tied off the last knot at a leisurely pace, glaring at him the whole time. He gestured with his hands for me to hurry up as his diaphragm contracted. I finally finished. He gave me a quick affirmative and kicked to the surface, desperate for a breath. I took my time, joined him topside, and found him gasping, while I felt strangely relaxed. When the chips were down at the pool during Air Force pararescue training, I'd buckled. This time, I won a major battle in the water. It was a big victory, but the war wasn't over. After I passed the knot tying evolution, we had 2 minutes to climb out onto the deck, get dressed, and head back to the classroom. During first phase, that's usually plenty of time, but a lot of us, not just me, were still healing from Hell Week and not moving at our typical lightning pace. On top of that, once we got through Hell Week, Class 231 went through a bit of an attitude adjustment. Hell Week is designed to show you that a human is capable of much more than you know. It opens your mind to the true possibilities of human potential, and with that comes a change in your mentality. You no longer fear cold water or doing push-ups all day. You realize that no matter what they do to you, they will never break you, so you don't rush as much to make their arbitrary deadlines. You know, if you don't make it, the instructors will beat you down, meaning push-ups, getting wet and sandy, anything to up the pain and discomfort quotient. But for those of us knuckle draggers still in the mix, our attitude was, so be it. None of us feared the instructors anymore, and we weren't about to rush. They didn't like that one damn bit. I had seen a lot of beatdowns while at Bud's, but the one we received that day will go down as one of the worst in history. We did push-ups until we couldn't pick ourselves up off the deck. Then they turned us on our backs and demanded flutter kicks. Each kick was torture for me. I kept putting my legs down because of the pain. I was showing weakness, and if you show weakness, it is on. Psycho and SBG descended and took turns on me. I went from push-ups to flutter kicks to bear crawls until they got tired. I could feel the moving parts of my knees shifting, floating, and grabbing every time I bent it to do those bear crawls, and it was agonizing. I moved slower than normal and knew I was broken. That simple question bubbled up again. Why? What was I trying to prove? Quitting seemed the sane choice. The comfort of mediocrity sounded like sweet relief until Psycho screamed in my ear, "Move faster, motherfucker." Once again, an amazing feeling washed over me. I wasn't focused on outdoing him this time. I was in the worst pain of my life, but my victory in the pool minutes before came rushing back. I'd finally proved to myself that I was a decent enough waterman to belong in the Navy SEALs. Heady stuff for a negatively buoyant kid that never took a swim lesson in his entire life. And the reason I got there was because I put in the work. The pool had been my kryptonite. Even though I was a far better swimmer as a SEAL candidate, I was still so stressed about water evolutions that I used to hit the pool after a day of training at least 3 times a week. I scaled the 15-foot fence just to gain after-hours access. Other than the academic aspect, nothing scared me as much about the prospects of butters like the swimming drills, and by dedicating time, I was able to callous over that fear and hit new levels underwater when the pressure was on. I thought about the incredible power of a calloused mind on task as Psycho and SBG beat me down And that thought became a feeling that took over my body and made me move as fast as a bear around that pool. I couldn't believe what I was doing. The intense pain was gone, and so were those nagging questions. I was putting out harder than ever, breaking through the limitations of injury and pain tolerance, and riding a second wind delivered by a callous mind. After the bear crawls, I went back to doing flutter kicks, and I still had no pain. As we were leaving the pool a half hour later, SBG asked, "Goggins, what got into your ass to make you Superman?" I just smiled and left the pool. I didn't want to say anything because I didn't yet understand what I now know. Similar to using an opponent's energy to gain an advantage, leaning on your callous mind in the heat of battle can shift your thinking as well. Remembering what you've been through and how that has strengthened your mindset can lift you out of a negative brain loop and help you bypass those weak 1-second impulses to give in so you can power through obstacles. And when you leverage a calloused mind like I did around the pool that day and keep fighting through pain, it can help you push your limits, because if you accept the pain as a natural process and refuse to give in and give up, you will engage the sympathetic nervous system, which shifts your hormonal flow. The sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight reflex. It's bubbling just below the surface. And when you are lost, stressed out, or struggling, like I was when I was a down and out kid, that's the part of your mind that's driving the bus. We've all tasted this feeling before. Those mornings when going on a run is the last thing you want to do, but then 20 minutes into it, you feel energized. That's the work of the sympathetic nervous system. What I've found is that you can tap into it on call as long as you know how to manage your own mind. When you indulge in negative self-talk, the gifts of a sympathetic response will remain out of reach. However, if you can manage those moments of pain that come with maximum effort by remembering what you've been through to get to that point in your life, you will be in a better position to persevere and choose fight over flight. That will allow you to use the adrenaline that comes with a sympathetic response to go even harder. Obstacles at work and school can also be overcome with your calloused mind. In those cases, pushing through a given flashpoint isn't likely to lead to a sympathetic response, but it will keep you motivated to push through any doubt you feel about your own abilities. No matter the task at hand, there is always opportunity for self-doubt. Whenever you decide to follow a dream or set a goal, you are just as likely to come up with all the reasons why the likelihood of success is low. Blame it on the f***ed up evolutionary wiring of the human mind. But you don't have to let your doubt into the cockpit. You can tolerate doubt as a backseat driver, but if you put doubt in the pilot's seat, defeat is guaranteed. Remembering that you've been through difficulties before and have always survived to fight again shifts the conversation in your head. It will allow you to control and manage doubt and keep you focused on taking each and every step necessary to achieve the task at hand. Sounds simple, right? It isn't. Very few people even bother to try to control the way their thoughts and doubts bubble up. The vast majority of us are slaves to our minds. Most don't even make the first effort when it comes to mastering their thought process because it's a never-ending chore and impossible to get right every time. The average person thinks 2,000, 3,000 thoughts per hour. That's 30 to 50 per minute. Some of those shots will slip by the goalie. It's inevitable, especially if you coast through life. Physical training is the perfect crucible to learn how to manage your thought process, because when you're working out, your focus is more likely to be single-pointed and your response to stress and pain is immediate and measurable. Do you hammer hard and snag that personal best like you said you would? Or do you crumble? That decision rarely comes down to physical ability. It's almost always a test of how well you are managing your own mind. If you push yourself through each split and use that energy to maintain a strong pace, you have a great chance of recording a faster time. Granted, some days it's easier to do that than others, and the clock or the score doesn't matter anyway. The reason it's important to push hardest when you want to quit the most is because it helps you callous your mind. It's the same reason why you have to do your best work when you are the least motivated. That's why I love pizza and Buddhism, why I still love it today. Physical challenges strengthen my mind, so I'm ready for whatever life throws at me. And it will do the same for you. But no matter how well you deploy it, a calloused mind can't heal broken bones. On the mile-long hike back to the Buds compound, the feeling of victory evaporated, and I could feel the damage I'd done. I had 20 weeks of training in front of me, dozens of evolutions ahead, and I could barely walk. While I wanted to deny the pain in my knee, I knew I was so I limped straight to medical. When he saw my knee, the doc didn't say a damn thing. He just shook his head and sent me to get an x-ray that revealed a fractured kneecap. In Buds, when reservists sustain injuries that take a long time to heal, they're sent home, and that's what happened to me. I crutched my ass back to the barracks, demoralized, and while checking out, I saw some of the guys that quit during Hell Week. When I first glimpsed their helmets lined up beneath the bell, I felt sorry for them because I knew the empty feeling of giving up. But seeing them face to face reminded me that failure is a part of life, and now we all had to press on. I hadn't quit, so I knew I'd be invited back. But I had no idea if that meant a third Hell Week or not. Or if after getting rolled twice, I still had the burning desire to fight through another hurricane of pain with no guarantee of success. Given my injury record, how could I? I left the Buds compound with more self-awareness and more mastery over my mind than I'd ever had before. But my future was just as uncertain.
I've had other friends who were drug and alcohol addicts who quit after one conversation, never went back.
That's awesome. That means they want it.
Yeah, just one guy, I won't out him, but walked up to me at a party in 2019, July 4th party, and said, I'm a pile. And I go, what? And he goes, I'm a pile. Look at me. I'm 60 pounds overweight. I go, do you drink? He goes, every day. I go, how much? He goes, a case. He goes, I smoke a lot of weed. But he's successful in other areas of his life. And so I said, well, here's what I know. Quit alcohol and weed for you. You know, I'm not telling people what to do. Don't eat until 2 p.m. Get on an exercise bike and pedal in the morning like someone's chasing you with a poison dart till you want to puke. And I was kind of half joking.
Right.
And then 2 months later, he was like, I haven't had a drink. I lost 30 pounds. He lost that 60 pounds. He never went back. Now he's super fit. It's amazing. So some people flip the switch. He is very self-critical by nature.
That's what flips the switch.
He's super self-critical.
Yep. That's what flips the switch.
Yeah.
Think about it, man. We know what to do. We don't need Angie Huberman to tell us what to do. We know what to do. Every one of us. That's why he flipped it so fast, because he knew what to do. He didn't go by your exact protocol. He didn't go by the exact, no. He knew exactly what to do. And you just saying shit to him, it woke something up. He knew what to do. And that's the thing that people need to get, that you know what to do, why aren't you doing it?
And I'm talking about myself now. You know, those modes of just kind of passive consumption, they're so easy to wash over us. I used to have this thing, and I'm fighting this now because I knew we were gonna have this conversation today, where I like to start things on the hour or the half hour.
Right.
Worst practice in the world for me, because if I miss that half hour, I'm like, it's 12:33. I'll start at 12:45.
Right.
It's 12:45. I'll start at 1. I just lost time.
Right.
So this is so stupid, right? And the other day I was like, man, I got to tell David about this, because my new thing is I start no matter what time it is.
Right.
If I wake up in the middle of the night, I got a friend, he paints in the middle of the night. I'm like, you're an insomniac? He's like, I don't know, I just do it. Then sometimes he goes back to sleep, sometimes he doesn't. Everyone's got their thing, but I thought about this. I'm like, I'm no more am I going to say I'm starting at 1, because I know me.
Right.
If I miss the 1 o'clock ding,
right,
and then my pen's not hitting the paper, I'm not typing on the keyboard, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
Like that's a self-admitted weakness.
I love it, man. I had that for a lot of years. I know I'm going to do it. That's the haunting part, is that it's going to happen. It has to happen. And that's a fact. Like, there's no get out of jail free card, bro. None. Like, that is a life that I don't know. I don't have that ability, or I have the ability. I don't have the, I'm not good enough, smart enough. I'm not talented enough to do that. Some people are. Some people can start at 1. Some people don't have to start at all. If you lack talent, You can't sit back and say, I'll start in half an hour. I can't do that. I got to start now. And then after I get back from starting, I got to start again. And then when I get done with that run or that study session, if it wasn't good enough, I got to go back again. Because repetition is what taught me everything.
I had Huberman on the show a few months ago, and he told me about bringing you into his lab and putting you in VR underwater with sharks.
Right.
Give me your experience with Huberman.
He's great. He knows his stuff. He knows his stuff. He's a very knowledgeable man on what he's doing.
What's being in VR with sharks like?
It's nothing.
No?
No, because one thing about me is I deal in reality. You put me in VR, it's VR. It's a fake thing. And I work in reality. I only work in reality. I don't work in fake situations. So that's why it didn't work on me. You put me in a real ocean with real sharks, you'll get your real reaction. You put me in a room when you walk in the door and you sit down in the chair, you put some on your face. I know I'm in a chair. I know I'm in a room. If you get that psyched the fuck out, you need to study that more than that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Why are you so sensitive?
Why are you so
fragile?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you are on a high wire because you're afraid of heights, but you're sitting firmly on the fucking ground, you need to study the fact that you're doing something wrong. Don't study the afraid of heights. Study why the fuck do I know I'm on the fucking ground in a fucking chair, but I'm afraid of what's on this screen. So I don't allow anything to go beyond the truth.
He said that, obviously you didn't know this in advance. It could have been the most lifelike VR in the history of the world.
Right.
And apparently it was a group of you guys, and someone had to go first. Someone had to go first. You're not that good with water. Not sure how you feel about sharks, but can't imagine you're a fan. And you were just like, me please. Yep. I'm first.
Yeah, I'm like that with everything. Because why sit back in the back and think about, let me watch you go first. You can watch me go first.
Is there anything that you'd like to study with Huberman? Would there be any like cool tests? Is there anything that you've been thinking about to do with performance or anything like that at the moment?
No.
You've just got your own mental lab. You're doing
I got my own
everything
mental
yourself.
lab. Everything I need is in my mental lab. Everything. Because I'm in constant study of myself. And I know what needs to be conquered because I'm constantly going through what I don't like, what I'm not comfortable with. You know, like I know, and only I can fix these problems because I have to face these problems. So I have a rolling log on what needs to happen. So I'm really good at being accountable about, okay, you need to be better here, you need to be better here, you need to overcome this, overcome that, and I do a good job of doing that.
You talk about performance without a purpose. What's that?
So, like, for instance, let's say you have no races. Let's say you have no classes, no nothing. There's no purpose in your life. You know, people need to have purpose to get up. They need purpose to perform. You need to get to a point in your life where there's nothing on the docket. There is no 5K. There's no I'm going to get into school to be this or that and still perform to the highest level. Because what people don't get is one day that thing's going to come up. And if you're not constantly performing without purpose, you're not going to be ready when the time comes. It's this magical thing, purpose, that we're all looking for. But what's funny about it all is that we need these things to perform. But we don't take a second to realize the purpose is always there. The purpose never leaves us because the very purpose is you. You are always the purpose. There may be another purpose, like being a SEAL or going to college or whatever, but the main purpose in life is you. So if you wake up in the morning and you don't want to do something, you don't care enough about yourself. And that's what you need to really research is, man, why am I not doing this for myself? Because that is the number one purpose in life, is to better oneself. So that's the only purpose I can need. So the reason I get up every day, even though there's no race or there's no school or there's nothing in front of me, is because I have pride in myself.
What's so truly unusual about what you're describing, your process, is that, you know, from go, it's hard.
Yep.
And I have to ask, was being 300 pounds, having I'm using the words you described.
No, do it.
You've said it before. You had a tendency at one point in your life early on, tell lies, try and get people's approval.
Lie my ass off.
Crazy haircuts, attention seeking, and yet all of that triggered something that now is extraordinary.
Right.
Do you think those hardships were necessary to flip the switch?
I don't know if they were necessary, but it was something that made me feel, I didn't feel good. It was easy. The brain that I was given as a child, it was easy to go home and think about how do I want to be a freak today? How do I want to show up to school today and be a freak? It didn't require me going home and opening the book up saying, it's going to take me all year to learn this fucking page. So instead of learning that page, I learned how to become a character. And maybe that character that I created, that 300-pound insecure guy that used to fake it till I make it type of guy, let me become your friend, let me lie to you until you like me type of guy. When you have any manhood, womanhood, a human being, a soul, a spirit, I must have just this much pride, because that's exactly what opened the door for me. Because every day you were a character, every day you were a clown, every day you opened that Spanish book or that science book or English book, and you looked at it, it looked like a foreign language. And you're saying, where do I start? Where do I start? And obviously it was necessary. The more I talk about it, it was necessary, because what happened is I became haunted by the mere fact that this is my existence. And you got to live with that. And I lived with it for a lot of years until I sat back and said, okay, all right, I know what this takes. And when you sit back, as f***ed up as I was, and I had a laundry list, a table like this of what I have to do to become just a human being that can make ends meet, that can make $1,000 a month just to get there. It was like, oh my God, dude, I'm 16, 17, I can't read, I can't write, and oh my God, I'm so behind the power curve, and my brain is about being depressed, and my dad beat, my mom's not home, and kids are calling me nigger at school, and I'm like, oh my God, man, what the f do I do? And it wasn't like someone came around and said, hey man, you can do this. This is all me. Some people know, where does this cold man come from? I'm not trying to be cold. It's the reality of my life. It's the reality of a lot of people's lives. And so, yeah, that had to happen for me to be haunted, to pull out, to extract the guy at the end of the day. That haunting is something that's still there today. Because no matter how much you improve, no matter how much you change who you are, it's not permanent. You don't just wake up and say, oh my God, man, you're David Goggins, you break records, you do this, you do that. People want to know, how are you able to just be so hard? Because I never turned the fucking thing off. Because once it turns off, I go right back to the David Goggins that is. And that's the guy that I'm constantly fighting every day. You know why people connect with my book so well? For some reason, God put me in almost every up situation on the planet Earth. So when I talk to people, it's not sugar-coated, because I'm not saying it from I was 175 pounds my whole life. I don't say much to those people. Maybe you're a piece of shit. Maybe you want to be nobody. Maybe you're happy exactly where you are in life, because obviously you are. Maybe you don't have the determination to be somebody better than who you are. And if you want to live with that, I'll support you in that. If you're good with being who you are, that every day you wake up and every day you smell like shit because you can't wash your body well, and your skin's messed up because your health's so bad, and you can't put your clothes on right, you need help with that. You need help, like when I was doing, I need help wiping my ass. That makes you feel good? Nothing I can say to you. If every day you wake up with this, see, people are haunted, but they obviously like horror films because they keep watching the same fucking movie. I don't like horror films. A lot of people like horror films. So I don't say much to them. I say exactly what I said to you, right there. Because I was once you. I didn't like horror films, so I changed it. Some people are just, they become, like you said, it gets real small when you're lazy and you're fat. Their will is so small that they don't have any, and you can't give it to them. There has to be something. This is what I'm talking about now, because this isn't a hack. This has to be in you. Something in you has to wake up. And usually the only person that can wake it up is you. Sometimes you can read a David Goggins book because I was all this and then a lot more up. But if you don't have a little flame, just barely, you're done. I can't light it for you. And that's the harsh reality of this life that I want to get across so fucking bad. You can watch me, you can watch you, you can watch Rogan and Cameron Haynes, all these motherfuckers. You can go to Tony Robbins's fucking bullshit, all this, do all this. If you could keep going back and keep spending money and spending money and spending money with no results, you can wonder, wow, maybe let me go try out David Goggins. He ain't gonna fucking help you. You have to explore, examine the insides of yourself. And what do you really want out of life? Your friend, and a lot of people out here just don't fucking want it. So guess what? Have fun with your life. Go from 3 to 350 to 400 to 450 to 500 because you don't want it. And that's the harsh reality. I can't give you shit. You can't give them shit. We can give you ideas. At the end of the day, when I was losing the weight, I had to miserably wake up every morning in the cold because it was Indiana, November when it started. I was miserable. This is your new life. Take it or leave it. There's no happiness about it. There's no peace behind it. It sucks. It just sucks. And that's the one thing, if I could teach anybody anything, it just fucking sucks. And it's going to continue to suck. And then one day you'll get to a special part in your life that it might get a little bit better. But to lose the weight you have to lose, my friend, sorry, it's going to suck every fucking day. Because then when you're 300 pounds, you're going to go out to lose weight, you could probably get injured. So then you got to work on the injury, and then you get even more depressed. This is what I went through. And then you're hungry because now you're depressed. It's just a vicious cycle. And if you're not strong mentally and you have no willpower, you're going to continue falling back in this hole versus the man that sits back and goes, all right, motherfucker. This is why I cuss, because this is what is in me. This is what it took for me to be me. Sorry. It didn't take, hey, okay, we're going to do this today. No, this fucking really sucks. This is real, dude. This is real. And every day, I'm set back. I'm set back. I'm set back. I'm set back. So this is what I would tell your boy. This is exactly what I tell him. Every day you wake up, you're going to probably be set back for the first 4 weeks before you lose significant weight because of the mind's going to be fucking with you the whole time. There's no dopamine. There's no dopamine in there at 300 pounds. You got nothing. Your hormones are shot. You have to envision something that is more powerful than you. Something has to get you out of bed, and you have to create it. It has to be false because you're not it. You're a fat piece of shit, and that's the reality of it. So you have to create a false reality to live in that just to get to work on yourself. That's the reality.
In pararescue training, water confidence is part of the 10-week program, and it's filled with specific evolutions designed to test how well we perform in the water under stress. One of the worst evolutions for me was called bobbing. The class was divided into groups of 5, lined up from gutter to gutter in the shallow end, and fully kitted up. Our backs were strapped with twin 80s made from galvanized steel, and we wore 16-pound weight belts too. We were loaded the down, which would have been fine, except in this evolution, we weren't allowed to breathe from those tanks. Instead, we were told to walk backward down the slope of the pool from the 3-foot section to the deep end, about 10 feet down, and on that slow walk into position, my mind swirled with doubt and negativity. What the fuck are you doing here? This isn't for you. You can't swim. You're an imposter, and they will find you out. Time slowed down, and those seconds seemed like minutes. My diaphragm lurched, trying to force air into my lungs. Theoretically, I knew that relaxation was the key to all the underwater evolutions, but I was too terrified to let go. My jaw clenched as tight as my fists. My head throbbed as I worked to stave off panic. Finally, we were all in position, and it was time to start bobbing. That meant pushing up from the bottom to the surface without the benefit of finning, getting a gulp of air, and sinking back down. It wasn't easy getting up fully loaded, but at least I was able to breathe. And that first breath was a salvation. Oxygen flooded my system, and I started to relax until the instructor yelled, "Switch." That was our cue to take our fins from our feet, place them on our hands, and use one pull with our arms to propel ourselves to the surface. We were allowed to push off the floor of the pool, but we couldn't kick. We did that for 5 minutes. Shallow water and surface blackouts aren't uncommon during water confidence training. It goes along with stressing the body and limiting oxygen intake. With the flippers on my hands, I'd barely get my face high enough out of the water to breathe. And in between, I was working hard and burning oxygen. And when you burn too much too fast, your brain shuts down and you will black the fuck out. Our instructors called that meeting the wizard. As the clock ticked, I could see stars materializing in my peripheral vision and felt the wizard creeping close. I passed that evolution, and soon, fitting with my arms or feet became easy for me. What stayed hard from beginning to end was one of our simplest tasks, reading water without our hands. We had to keep our hands and our chins high above the water, using only our legs, which we'd swirl in a blender-like motion for 3 minutes. That doesn't sound like much time, and for most of the class, it was easy. For me, it was damn near impossible. My chin kept hitting the water, which meant the time would start again from 000. All around me, my classmates were so comfortable, their legs were barely moving, while mine were whirring at top speed, and I still couldn't get half as high as those white boys who looked to be defying gravity. Every day, it was another humiliation in the pool. Not that I was embarrassed publicly. I passed all the evolutions, but inside, I was suffering. Each night, I'd fixate on the next day's task and become so terrified I couldn't sleep. And soon my fear morphed into resentment toward my classmates, who, in my mind, had it easy, which dredged up my past. I was the only black man in my unit, which reminded me of my childhood in rural Indiana, and the harder the water confidence training became, the higher those dark waters would rise, until it seemed I was also being drowned from the inside out, while the rest of my class was sleeping. That potent cocktail of fear and rage thrummed through my veins, and my nocturnal fixations became their own kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. One where failure was inevitable because my unchecked fear was unleashing something I couldn't control, the quitting mind. It all came to a head 6 weeks into training with the buddy breathing exercise. We partnered up, each pair gripped one another by the forearm, and took turns breathing through just one snorkel. Meanwhile, the instructors thrashed us, trying to separate us from our snorkel. All of this was supposed to be happening at or near the surface, but I was negatively buoyant, which meant I was sinking into the middle waters of the deep end, dragging my partner down with me. He'd take a breath and pass the snorkel down to me. I'd swim to the surface, exhale, and attempt to clear the water from our snorkel and get a clean breath before passing it back to him. But the instructors made that almost impossible. I'd usually only clear the tube halfway and inhale more water than air. From the jump, I was operating from an oxygen deficit while fighting to stay near the surface. In military training, it's the instructor's job to identify weak links and challenge them to perform or quit. And they could tell I was struggling. In the pool that day, one of them was always in my face, yelling and thrashing me while I choked, trying and failing to gulp air through a narrow tube to stave off the wizard. I went under and remember looking up at the rest of the class, splayed out like serene starfish on the surface. Calm as can be, they passed their snorkels back and forth with ease, while I fumed. I know now that my instructor was just doing his job, but back then I thought, this fucker's not giving me a fair shot. I passed that evolution too, but I still had 11 more evolutions and 4 more weeks of water confidence training to go. It made sense. We would be jumping out of airplanes over water. We needed it. I just didn't want to do it anymore. And the next morning, I was offered a way out I hadn't seen coming. Weeks earlier, we'd had our blood drawn during a med check, and the doctors discovered I carried the sickle cell trait. I didn't have the disease, sickle cell anemia, but I had the trait, which was believed at the time to increase the risk of sudden exercise-related death due to cardiac arrest. The Air Force didn't want me dropping dead in the middle of an evolution and pulled me out of training on the medical. I pretended to take the news hard, as if my dream was being ripped away. I made a big fucking act of being pissed off, but inside I was ecstatic. Later that week, the doctors reversed their decision. They didn't specifically say it was safe for me to continue, but they said the trait wasn't yet well understood and allowed me to decide for myself. When I reported back to training, the master sergeant informed me that I'd missed too much time and that if I wanted to continue, I would have to start over from day one, week one. Instead of less than 4 weeks, I'd have to endure another 10 weeks of the terror, rage, and insomnia that came with water confidence. These days, that kind of thing wouldn't even register on my radar. You tell me to run longer and harder than everyone else just to get a fair shake, I'd say, roger that, and keep moving. But back then, I was still half-baked. Physically, I was strong, but I was not even close to mastering my mind. The master sergeant stared at me, awaiting my response. I couldn't even look him in the eye when I said, "You know what, Master Sergeant, the doctor doesn't know much about this sickle cell thing, and it's bothering me." He nodded, emotionless, and signed the papers, pulling me out of the program for good. He cited sickle cell, and on paper, I didn't quit, but I knew the truth. If I had been the guy I am today, I wouldn't have given two fucks about sickle cell. I still have the sickle cell trait. You don't just get rid of it, but back then an obstacle had appeared, and I'd folded. I moved on to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, told my friends and family that I was forced from the program on a medical, and served out my 4 years in the Tactical Air Control Party, which works with some special operations units. I trained to liaise between ground units and air support, fast movers like F-15s and F-16s, behind enemy lines. It was challenging work with intelligent people, but sadly, I was never proud of it and didn't see the opportunities offered because I knew I was a quitter who had let fear dictate my future. I buried my shame in the gym and at the kitchen table. I got into powerlifting and layered on the mass. I ate and worked out and ate. In my last days in the Air Force, I weighed 255 pounds. After my discharge, I continued to bulk up with both muscle and fat until I weighed nearly 300 pounds. I wanted to be big because being big hit David Goggins. I was able to tuck this 175-pound person into those 21-inch biceps and that flabby belly. I grew a burly mustache and was intimidating to everyone who saw me, but inside I knew I was a pussy, and that's a haunting feeling. The morning I began to take charge of my destiny started out like any other. When the clock struck 7 a.m., my Ecolab shift ended and I hit the Steak and Shake drive-thru to score a large chocolate milkshake. Next stop, 7-Eleven, for a box of Hostess mini chocolate donuts. I gobbled those on my 45-minute drive home to a beautiful apartment on a golf course in pretty Carmel, Indiana, which I shared with my wife Pam and her daughter. We couldn't afford that life. Pam wasn't even working, but in those credit card debt loading days, nothing made much sense. I was doing 70 EMF on the highway, mainlining sugar and listening to a local classic rock station when the sound of silence poured from the stereo. Simon E. Garfunkel's words echoed like truth. Darkness was a friend indeed. I worked in the dark, hid my true self from friends and strangers. Nobody would have believed how numb and afraid I was back then because I looked like a beast that no one would dare f with. But my mind wasn't right, and my soul was weighed down by too much trauma and failure. I had every excuse in the world to be a loser and used them all. My life was crumbling, and Pam dealt with that by fleeing the scene. Her parents still lived in Brazil, just 70 miles away. We spent most of our time apart. I arrived home from work around 8 a.m., and the phone rang as soon as I walked in the door. It was my mother. She knew my routine. "Come on over for your staple," she said. My staple was a breakfast buffet for one, the likes of which few could put down in a single sitting. Think 8 Pillsbury cinnamon rolls, a half dozen scrambled eggs, a half pound of bacon, and 2 bowls of Fruity Pebbles. Don't forget, I had just decimated a box of donuts and a chocolate shake. I didn't even have to respond. She knew I was coming. Food was my drug of choice, and I always sucked up every last crumb. I hung up, flipped on the television, and stomped down the hall to the shower, where I could hear a narrator's voice filter through the steam. Navy SEALs, toughest, the world. I wrapped a towel around my waist and rushed back into the living room. I was so big, the towel barely covered my fat ass, but I sat down on the couch and didn't move for 30 minutes. The show followed basic underwater demolition SEAL, training class 224 through Hell Week, the most arduous series of tasks and the most physically demanding training in the military. I watched men sweat and suffer as they tore through muddy obstacle courses, ran on the soft sand holding logs overhead, and shivered in icy surf. Sweat rolled on my scalp. I was literally on the edge of my seat as I saw guys, some of the strongest of them all, ring the bell and quit. Made sense. Only 1/3 of the men who begin BUD/S make it through Hell Week, and in all of my time in pararescue training, I couldn't remember feeling as awful as these men looked. They were swollen, chafed, sleep-deprived, and dead on their feet, and I was jealous of them. The longer I watched, the more certain I became that there were answers buried in all that suffering, answers that I needed. More than once, the camera panned over the endless frothing ocean, and each time I felt pathetic. The SEALs were everything I wasn't. They were about pride, dignity, and the type of excellence that came from bathing in the fire, getting beat the fuck, and going back for more. Again and again. They were the human equivalent of the hardest, sharpest sword you could imagine. They sought out the flame, took the pounding for as long as necessary, longer even, until they were fearless and deadly. They weren't motivated. They were driven. The show ended with graduation. 22 proud men stood shoulder to shoulder in their dress whites before the camera pushed in on their commanding officer. In a society where mediocrity is too often the standard and too often rewarded, he said, there is intense fascination with men who detest mediocrity, who refuse to define themselves in conventional terms, and who seek to transcend traditionally recognized human capabilities. This is exactly the type of person BUD/S is meant to find. The man who finds a way to complete each and every task to the best of his ability. The man who will adapt and overcome any and all obstacles. In that moment, it felt as though the commanding officer was talking directly to me. But after the show ended, I walked back to the bathroom, faced the mirror, and stared myself down. I looked every bit of 300 pounds. I was everything all the haters back home said I would be: uneducated with no real-world skills, zero discipline, and a dead-end future. Mediocrity would have been a major promotion. I was at the bottom of the barrel of life, pooling in the dregs, but for the first time in way too long, I was awake. I barely spoke to my mother during breakfast, and only ate half my staple because my mind was on unfinished business. I'd always wanted to join an elite special operations unit, and beneath all the rolls of flesh and layers of failure, that desire was still there. Now it was coming back to life, thanks to a chance viewing of a show that continued to work on me like a virus moving cell to cell, taking over. It became an obsession I couldn't shake. Every morning after work for almost 3 weeks, I called active duty recruiters in the Navy and told them my story. I called offices all over the country. I said I was willing to move as long as they could get me to SEAL training. Everyone turned me down. Most weren't interested in candidates with prior service. One local recruiting office was intrigued and wanted to meet in person. But when I got there, they laughed in my face. I was way too heavy, and in their eyes, I was just another delusional pretender. I left that meeting feeling the same way. After calling all the active duty recruiting offices I could find, I dialed the local unit of the Naval Reserves and spoke to Petty Officer Stephen Shaljo for the first time. Shaljo had worked with multiple F-14 squadrons as an electrician and instructor at NAS Miramar for 8 years before joining the recruitment staff in San Diego, where the SEALs trained. He worked day and night and rose quickly in the ranks. His move to Indianapolis came with a promotion and the challenge of finding Navy recruits in the middle of the corn. He'd only been on the job in Indy for 10 days by the time I called. And if I'd reached anyone else, you probably wouldn't be reading this book. But through a combination of dumb luck and stubborn persistence, I found one of the finest recruiters in the Navy, a guy whose favorite task was discovering diamonds in the rough. Prior service guys like me who were looking to re-enlist and hoping to land in special operations. Our initial conversation didn't last long. He said he could help me and that I should come in to meet in person. That sounded familiar. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to his office, but didn't get my hopes too high. By the time I arrived a half hour later, he was already on the phone with Bud's administration. Every sailor in that office, all of them white, were surprised to see me, except Xiaojo. If I was a heavyweight, Xiaojo was a lightweight at 5'7", but he didn't seem fazed by my size, at least not at first. He was outgoing and warm like any salesman, though I could tell he had some pit bull in him. He led me down a hall to weigh me in, and while standing on the scale, I eyed a weight chart pinned to the wall. At my height, the maximum allowable weight for the Navy was 191 pounds. I held my breath, sucked in my gut as much as I could, and puffed out my chest in a sorry attempt to stave off the humiliating moment where he'd let me down easy. That moment never came. "You're a big boy," Xiaojo said, smiling and shaking his head as he scratched 297 pounds on a chart in his file folder. The Navy has a program that allows recruits in the reserves to become active duty. That's what we'll use for this. It's being phased out at the end of the year, so we need to get you classed up before then. Point is, you have some work to do, but you knew that. I followed his eyes to the weight chart and checked it again. He nodded, smiled, patted me on the shoulder, and left me to face my truth. I had less than 3 months to lose 106 pounds. It sounded like an impossible task, which is one reason I didn't quit my job. The other was the ASVAB. That nightmare test had come back to life like Frankenstein's fucking monster. I'd passed it once before to enlist in the Air Force, but to qualify for Buds, I'd have to score much higher. For 2 weeks, I studied all day and zapped pests each night. I wasn't working out yet. Serious weight loss would have to wait. I took the test on a Saturday afternoon. The following Monday, I called Xiaojo. "Welcome to the Navy," he said. He downloaded the good news first. I'd done exceptionally well on some sections and was now officially a reservist, but I'd only scored a 44 on mechanical comprehension. To qualify for Buds, I needed a 50. I'd have to retake the entire test in 5 weeks. These days, Stephen Xiaojo likes to call our chance connection fate. He said he could sense my drive the first moment we spoke, and that he believed in me from the jump, which is why my weight wasn't an issue for him. But after that ASVAB test, I was full of doubt. So maybe what happened later that night was also a form of fate, or a much needed dose of divine intervention. I'm not going to drop the name of the restaurant where it went down, because if I did, you'd never eat there again, and I'd have to hire a lawyer. Just know, this place was a disaster. I checked the traps outside first and found a dead rat. Inside, there were more dead rodents, a mouse and 2 rats on the sticky traps, and roaches in the garbage, which hadn't been emptied. I shook my head, got down on my knees under the sink, and sprayed up through a narrow gap in the wall. I didn't know it yet, but I'd found their nesting column, and when the poison hit, they started to scatter. Within seconds, there was a skittering across the back of my neck. I brushed it off and craned my neck to see a storm of roaches rain down to the kitchen floor from an open panel in the ceiling. I'd hit the motherload of cockroaches and the worst infestation I ever saw on the job for Ecolab. They kept coming. Roaches landed on my shoulders and my head. The floor was writhing with them. I left my canister in the kitchen, grabbed the sticky traps, and burst outside. I needed fresh air and more time to figure out how I was going to clear the restaurant of vermin. I considered my options on my way to the dumpster to trash the rodents, opened the lid, and found a live raccoon hissing mad. He bared his yellow teeth and lunged at me. I slammed the dumpster shut. What the seriously, what the fucking When was enough truly going to be enough? Was I willing to let my sorry present become a fucked up future? How much longer would I wait? How many more years would I burn, wondering if there was some greater purpose out there waiting for me? I knew right then that if I didn't make a stand and start walking the path of most resistance, I would end up in this mental hell forever. I didn't go back inside that restaurant. I didn't collect my gear. I started my truck, stopped for a chocolate shake, my comfort tea at that time, and drove home. It was still dark when I pulled up. I didn't care. I stripped off my work clothes, put on some sweats, and laced up my running shoes. I hadn't run in over a year, but I hit the streets ready to go 4 miles. I lasted 400 yards. My heart raced. I was so dizzy I had to sit down on the edge of the golf course to catch my breath before making the slow walk back to my house, where my melted shake was waiting to comfort me in yet another failure. I grabbed it, slurped, and slumped into my sofa. My eyes welled with tears. Who the f did I think I was? I was born nothing. I'd proven nothing, and I still wasn't worth a damn thing. David Goggins, a Navy SEAL. Yeah, right. What a pipe dream. I couldn't even run down the block for 5 minutes. All my fears and insecurities I'd bottled up for my entire life started raining down on my head. I was on the verge of giving in and giving up for good. That's when I found my old beat to this copy of Rocky, the one I'd had for 15 years, slid it into the machine, and fast forwarded to my favorite scene. Round 14, the original Rocky is still one of my all-time favorite films because it's about a know-nothing journeyman fighter living in poverty with no prospects. Even his own trainer won't work with him. Then, out of the blue, he's given a title shot with the champion, Apollo Creed, the most feared fighter in history, a man that has knocked out every opponent he's ever faced. All Rocky wants is to be the first to go the distance with Creed. That alone will make him someone he could be proud of for the first time in his life. The fight is closer than anyone anticipated, bloody and intense. And by the middle rounds, Rocky is taking on more and more punishment. He's losing the fight. And in round 14, he gets knocked down early, but pops right back up in the center of the ring. Apollo moves in, stalking him like a lion. He throws sharp left jabs, hits a slow-footed Rocky with a staggering combination, lands a punishing right hook and another. He backs Rocky into a corner. Rocky's legs are jelly. He can't even muster the strength to raise his arms in defense. Apollo slams another right hook into the side of Rocky's head, then a left hook and a vicious right-handed uppercut that puts Rocky down. Apollo retreats to the opposite corner with his arms held high. But even face down in that ring, Rocky doesn't give up. As the referee begins his 10 count, Rocky squirms toward the ropes. Mickey, his own trainer, urges him to stay down, but Rocky isn't hearing it. He pulls himself up to one knee, then all fours. The referee hits 6 as Rocky grabs the ropes and rises up. The crowd roars, and Apollo turns to see him still standing. Rocky waves Apollo over. The champ's shoulders slump in disbelief. The fight isn't over yet. I turned off the television and thought about my own life. It was a life devoid of any drive and passion, but I knew if I continued to surrender to my fear and my feelings of inadequacy, I would be allowing them to dictate my future forever. My only other choice was to try to find the power in the emotions that had laid me low, harness, and use them to empower me to rise up, which is exactly what I did. I dumped that shake in the trash, laced up my shoes, and hit the streets again. On my first run, I felt severe pain in my legs and my lungs at a quarter mile. My heart raced and I stopped. This time I felt the same pain. My heart raced like a car running hot, but I ran through it and the pain faded. By the time I bent over to catch my breath, I'd run a full mile. That's when I first realized that not all physical and mental limitations are real, and that I had a habit of giving up way too soon. I also knew that it would take every ounce of courage and toughness I could muster to pull off the impossible. I was staring at hours, days, and weeks of nonstop suffering. I would have to push myself to the very edge of my mortality. I had to accept the very real possibility that I might die, because this time I wouldn't quit, no matter how fast my heart raced and no matter how much pain I was in. Trouble was, there was no battle plan to follow, no blueprint. I had to create one from scratch. The typical day went something like this. I'd wake up at 4:30 a.m., munch a banana, and hit the ASVAB books. Around 5 a.m., I'd take that book to my stationary bike where I'd sweat and study for 2 hours. Remember, my body was a mess. I couldn't run multiple miles yet, so I had to burn as many calories as I could on the bike. After that, I'd drive over to Carmel High School and jump into the pool for a 2-hour swim. From there, I hit the gym for a circuit workout that included the bench press, the incline press, and lots of leg exercises. Bulk was the enemy. I needed reps, and I did 5 or 6 sets of 100 reps each. Then it was back to the stationary bike for 2 more hours. I was constantly hungry. Dinner was my one true meal each day, but there wasn't much to it. I ate a grilled or sauteed chicken breast and some sauteed vegetables, along with a thimble of rice. After dinner, I'd do another 2 hours on the bike, hit the sack, wake up and do it all over again, knowing the odds were stacked sky high against me. What I was trying to achieve is like a D student applying to Harvard or walking into a casino and putting every single dollar you own on a number in roulette and acting as if winning is a foregone conclusion. I was betting everything I had on myself with no guarantees. I weighed myself twice daily, and within 2 weeks I dropped 25 pounds. My progress only improved as I kept grinding, and the weight started peeling off. 10 days later, I was at 250, light enough to begin doing push-ups, pull-ups, and to start running my ass off. I'd still wake up, hit the stationary bike, the pool, and the gym, but I also incorporated 2, 3, and 4-mile runs. I ditched my running shoes and ordered a pair of Bates lights, the same boot seal candidates wearing buttons, and started running in those. With so much effort, you'd think my nights would have been restful, but they were filled with anxiety. My stomach growled and my mind swirled. I'd dream of complex ASVAB questions and dread the next day's workouts. I was putting out so much on almost no fuel that depression became a natural side effect. My splintering marriage was veering toward divorce. Palm made it very clear that she and my stepdaughter would not be moving to San Diego with me if by some miracle I could pull this off. They stayed in Brazil most of the time, and when I was all alone in Carmel, I was in turmoil. I felt both worthless and helpless, and my endless stream of self-defeating thoughts picked up steam. When depression smothers you, it blots out all light and leaves you with nothing to cling onto for hope. All you see is negativity. For me, the only way to make it through that was to feed off my depression. I had to flip it and convince myself that all that self-doubt and anxiety was confirmation that I was no longer living an aimless life. My task may turn out to be impossible, but at least I was back on a motherfucking mission. Some nights, when I was feeling low, I'd call Shaljo. He was always in the office early in the morning and late at night. I didn't confide in him about my depression because I didn't want him to doubt me. I used those calls to pump myself up. I told him how many pounds I dropped and how much work I was putting in, and he reminded me to keep studying for that ASVAB. Roger that. I had the Rocky soundtrack on cassette, and I listened to Going the Distance for inspiration. On long bike rides and runs, with those horns blasting in my brain, I'd imagine myself going through Bud, diving into cold water, and crushing Hell Week. I was wishing, I was hoping, but by the time I was down to 250, my quest to qualify for the SEALs wasn't a daydream anymore. I had a real chance to accomplish something most people, including myself, thought was impossible. Still, there were bad days. One morning, not long after I dipped below 250, I weighed in and had only lost a pound from the day before. I had so much weight to lose, I could not afford to plateau. That's all I thought about while running 6 miles and swimming 2. I was exhausted and sore when I arrived in the gym for my typical 3-hour circuit. After rocking over 100 pull-ups in a series of sets, I was back on the bar for a max set with no ceiling. Going in, my goal was to get to 12, but my hands were burning fire as I stretched my chin over the bar for the 10th time. For weeks, the temptation to pull back had been ever present, and I always refused. That day, however, the pain was too much, and after my 11th pull-up, I gave in, dropped down, and finished my workout, 1 pull-up shy. That 1 rep stayed with me, along with that 1 pound. I tried to get them out of my head, but they wouldn't leave me the fuck alone. They taunted me on the drive home and at my kitchen table while I ate a sliver of grilled chicken and a bland baked potato. I knew I wouldn't sleep that night unless I did something about it, so I grabbed my keys. "You cut corners and you are not gonna fucking make it," I said out loud as I drove back to the gym. "There are no shortcuts for you, Goggins." I did my entire pull-up workout over again. One missed pull-up cost me an extra $250, and there would be similar episodes. Whenever I cut a run or swim short because I was hungry or tired, I'd always go back and beat myself down even harder. That was the only way I could manage the demons in my mind. Either way, there would be suffering. I had to choose between physical suffering in the moment and the mental anguish of wondering if that one missed pull-up, that last lap in the pool, the quarter mile I skipped on the road or trail would end up costing me an opportunity of a lifetime. It was an easy choice. When it came to the SEALs, I wasn't leaving anything up to chance. On the eve of the ASVAB, with 4 weeks to go before training, making weight was no longer a worry. I was already down to 215 pounds and was faster and stronger than I'd ever been. I was running 6 miles a day, bicycling over 20 miles, and swimming more than 2, all of it in the dead of winter. My favorite run was the 6-mile Mountain Trail, an asphalt bike and walking path that lays through the trees in Indianapolis. It was the domain of cyclists and soccer moms with jogging strollers, weekend warriors, and seniors. By then, Shaljo had passed along the Navy SEAL warning order. It included all the workouts I would be expected to complete during first phase of buddies, and I was happy to double them. I knew that 190 men usually class up for a typical SEAL training, and only about 40 people make it all the way through. I didn't want to be just one of those 40. I wanted to be the best, but I had to pass the damn ASVAB first. I've been cramming every spare second. If I wasn't working out, I was at my kitchen table memorizing formulas and cycling through hundreds of vocabulary words. With my physical training going well, all my anxiety stuck to the ASVAB like paper clips to a magnet. This would be my last chance to take the test before my eligibility for the SEALs expired. I wasn't very smart, and based on past academic performance, there was no good reason to believe I'd pass with a score high enough to qualify for the SEALs. If I failed, my dream would die, and I'd be floating without purpose once again. The test was held in a small classroom on Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis. There were about 30 people there, all of us young. Most were just out of high school. We were each assigned an old school desktop computer. In the past month, the tests had been digitized and I wasn't experienced with computers. I didn't even think I could work the damn machine, let alone answer the questions, but the program proved idiot-proof and I settled in. The ASVAB has 10 sections and I was breezing through until I reached mechanical comprehension, my true serum. Within the hour, I would have a decent idea if I'd been lying to myself or if I had the raw stuff necessary to become a SEAL. Whenever a question stumped me, I marked my worksheet with a dash. There were about 30 questions in that section, and by the time I completed the test, I guessed at least 10 times. I needed some of them to go my way or I was out. After completing the final section, I was prompted to send the entire bundle to the administrator's computer at the front of the room where the score would be tabulated instantly. I peeked over my monitor and saw him sitting there, waiting. I pointed, clicked, and left the room. Buzzing with nervous energy, I paced the parking lot for a few minutes before finally ducking into my Honda Accord, but I didn't start the engine. I couldn't leave. I sat in the front seat for 15 minutes with a 1,000-yard stare. It would be at least 2 days before Shaljo would call with my results. But the answer to the riddle that was my future was already solved. I knew exactly where it was, and I had to know the truth. I gathered myself, walked back in, and approached the fortune teller. "You got to tell me what I got on this fucking test, man," I said. He peered up at me, surprised, but he didn't buckle. "I'm sorry, son. This is the government. There's a system for how they do things," he said. "I didn't make the rules, and I can't bend them." "Sir, you have no idea what this test means to me, to my life. It's everything." He looked into my glassy eyes for what felt like 5 minutes, then turned toward his machine. I'm breaking every rule in the book right now, he said. Goggins, right? I nodded and came around behind his seat as he scrolled through files. There you are. Congratulations, you scored 65. That's a great score. He was referencing my overall, but I didn't care about that. Everything hinged on my getting a 50 spot where it counted most. What did I get on mechanical comprehension? He shrugged, clicked and scrolled, and there it was. My new favorite number glowed on his screen. 50. Yes, I shouted. Yes, yes. There was still a handful of others taking the test, but this was the happiest moment in my life and I couldn't stifle it. I kept screaming yes at the top of my lungs. The administrator damn near fell out of his chair and everyone in that room stared at me like I was crazy. If they only knew how crazed I'd been. For 2 months, I dedicated my entire existence to this one moment, and I was damn well going to enjoy it. I rushed to my car and screamed some more. On my drive home, I called my mom. She was the one person aside from Xiaozhou who witnessed my metamorphosis. I fucking did it, I told her, tears in my eyes. I fucking did it. I'm going to be a SEAL. When Xiaozhou came to work the next day, he got the news and called me up. He sent in my recruitment package and had just heard back that I was in. I could tell he was happy for me and proud that what he saw in me the first time we met turned out to be real. But it wasn't all happy days. My wife had given me an implied ultimatum, and now I had a decision to make. Abandon the opportunity I'd worked so hard for and stay married, or get divorced and go try to become a SEAL. In the end, my choice didn't have anything to do with my feelings for Pam or her father. He'd apologized to me, by the way. It was about who I was and who I wanted to be. I was a prisoner in my own mind, and this opportunity was my only chance to break free. I celebrated my victory the way any SEAL candidate should. I put the fuck out. The following morning, and for the next 3 weeks, I spent time in the pool, strapped with a 16-pound weight belt. I swam underwater for 50 meters at a time and walked the length of the pool underwater with a brick in each hand, all on a single breath. The water would not own my ass this time. When I was done, I'd swim a mile or two, then head to a pond near my mother's home. Remember, this was Indiana, the American Midwest, in December. The trees were naked. Icicles hung like crystals from the eaves of houses, and snow blanketed the earth in all directions. But the pond wasn't completely frozen yet. I waded into the icy water dressed in camel pants, a brown short-sleeved shirt, and boots, laid back and looked into the gray sky. The hypothermic water washed over me. The pain was excruciating, and I fucking loved it. After a few minutes, I got out and started running, water sloshing in my boots, sand in my underwear. Within seconds, my t-shirt was frozen to my chest, my pants iced at the cuffs. I hit the Manan Trail. Steam poured from my nose and mouth as I grunted and slalomed speed walkers and joggers. Civilians. Their heads turned as I picked up speed and began sprinting, like Rocky in downtown Philly. I ran as fast as I could for as long as I could, from a past that no longer defined me toward a future undetermined. All I knew was that there would be pain and there would be purpose, and that I was ready. The first step on the journey toward a calloused mind is stepping outside your comfort zone on a regular basis. Dig out your journal again and write down all the things you don't like to do or that make you uncomfortable, especially those things you know are good for you. Now go do one of them and do it again. This is not about changing your life instantly. It's about moving the needle bit by bit and making those changes sustainable. That means digging down to the micro level and doing something that sucks every day. Even if it's as simple as making your bed, doing the dishes, ironing your clothes, or getting up before dawn and running 2 miles each day. Once that becomes comfortable, take it to 5, then 10 miles. If you already do all those things, find something you aren't doing. We all have areas in our lives we either ignore or can improve upon. Find yours. We often choose to focus on our strengths rather than our weaknesses. Use this time to make your weaknesses your strengths. Doing things, even small things, that make you uncomfortable will help make you strong. The more often you get uncomfortable, the stronger you'll become, And soon you'll develop a more productive, can do dialogue with yourself in stressful situations.
Where I come from, a lot of you guys come from dark places, just as dark as mine, maybe even darker. There's gonna be times in your life when you don't want to wake up, you don't want to go to work. There's gonna be times in your life where you don't think you're good enough, where your family, your wife, your girlfriend, your husband, your significant other is gonna doubt you. A lot of times we doubt yourself. In life, nothing is promised to us. And so we take that mentality and we use it as, woe is me. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good looking enough. I didn't get that lucky break. That's the one thing I hate about people in life, man. They're looking for this great lucky break. The lucky break that you have right now is that you woke the f up. Here's your lucky break. Now, there's something I came up with a long time ago because I would always get tired. I'd always be down, but I always had to keep on going. When times get hard and you're looking around and no one's there to pat you on your back, and ain't no more motherfuckers to carry them damn boats. It's just you dragging it, just dragging the boat by yourself. And all you want to do is stop, but you can't. So all you out here, just know one thing. Don't stop when you're fucking tired. Stop when you're done.
You want to be as hard as you can be. You don't want to be as hard as me, man. Sometimes being as hard as me is not a great thing. You want to make sure you can be as hard as you can be. So, you know, that's all like a relative scale. So, but I will tell you this. If you think you can and you're not, you are failing yourself. So that's kind of like the scale. The scale is a moving target for everybody. But people go, man, why are you going so hard every day, David? Because I know I can. So if you know you can do more and you're not, that's the scale. So always think that in the back of your head, like if you run 13 miles and you get home and you feel good, that's a good thing. But always know, like, you know, I felt good, I can go further next time. Always keep that scale in your mind.
So I know you love pain. You're like, pain. So what if, like, I have a back injury right now, and it's like, I know I could do more, but it hurts. So I'm like, okay, no, it hurts, I need to stop. Whereas you would be like, my feet are bleeding, my elbows are falling off, I'm gonna go. Like, I want to be that.
See, people get me wrong with that pain shit.
Yeah.
I don't love pain. So this is a good conversation.
Okay.
I don't love pain. It's just sometimes some of the things I do, pain is a part of the process. And you have to know how to manage pain, but also know when pain is becoming something that you can't manage, you need to stop. But for me, I've been managing pain my entire life. So once again, my pain tolerance and me knowing how far I can push myself, it's way out there.
Mm-hmm.
I know what the body, I know what the mind, I know what it can take. But once again, that's a very moving scale for a lot of people. So yeah, so definitely make sure that you understand that it's not that I love pain, that I know that sometimes I push myself to a point where pain is just going to happen. And then within that pain, I know how to manage pain very well. It's so easy to be great nowadays because so many people are focused on efficiency, getting the most for themselves with the least amount of time and effort. Let all of them leave the gym early, skip school, take sick days, commit to becoming the motherfucker with a never-ending task list. This is where you make up the difference in potential. By learning to maximize what you do have, you will not only level the playing field, but also surpass those born with more natural ability and advantages than you. Let your hours become days, then weeks, then years of effort. Allow discipline to seep into your cells until work becomes a reflex as automatic as breathing. With discipline as your medium, your life will become a work of art. Discipline builds mental endurance because when effort is your main priority, you stop looking for everything to be enjoyable. Our phones and social media have turned too many of us inside out with envy and greed as we get inundated with other people's success. Their new cars and houses, big contracts, resort vacations, and romantic getaways. We see how much fun everyone else is having and feel like the world is passing us by. So we bitch about it and then wonder why we are not where we want to be. When you become disciplined, you don't have time for that bullshit. Your insecurities become alarm bells reminding you that doing your chores or homework to the utmost of your ability and putting in extra time on the job or in the gym are requirements for a life well lived. A drive for self-optimization and daily repetition will build your capacity for work and give you confidence that you can take on more. With discipline as your engine, your workload and output will double, then triple. What you won't see, at least not at first, is the fact that your own personal evolution has begun to bear fruit. You won't see it because you'll be too busy taking action. Discipline does not have a belief system. It transcends class, color, and gender. It cuts through all the noise and strife. If you think that you are behind the 8 ball for whatever reason, discipline is the great equalizer. It erases all disadvantages. Nowadays, it doesn't matter where you are from or who you are. If you are disciplined, there will be no stopping you.
Why do you turn around and take that responsibility on? Because you're saying that, hey, I don't want to get off and run, but I know I've got 2.3 million people. I've got a bunch of people that are looking at it. You could walk away from it. Why do you do it?
Because I know that's the only place where growth happens. It's the only place, man. I'll never forget when I was younger and I lived in a $7 a month place and it f***ed up, everything was jacked up. I had a pair of jeans and I'll never forget this as long as I live. You know, first day of school, people go school shopping, right? Week out, 2 weeks out, maybe a month out. We didn't have any money to do that. So I had this pair of jeans that the inside of the pocket was green. The inside of the pocket was green. And I wore them almost every day. So what I did for the next year of school was I cut that pocket out so the green would show, so it looked like a new pair of jeans. All I wanted was money. All I wanted was a nice car, was a nice home. The second I got the money to do it, I realized this is bullshit. That's why I don't own a car. I don't own a place. I don't own shit. You will see me wearing the same fucking shit every fucking day. I don't none of that, nothing. What I realized is all I wanted in my life was look at that fucker in that accountability mirror and be proud of. And everything else went away. While you need money to be successful, you need money to live, you need money. Money does buy a form of happiness because without it, you're fucking miserable. But once I realized it doesn't mean shit for me.
What makes you happy?
Achievement, reaching goals, accomplishing things that I thought were impossible to accomplish. Because while I don't smile all the time, there's this feeling inside of me that very few people have. Very few people have. Because when you come from where I came from, nothing, and you make something out of nothing, the feeling stays with you all day and long. And it allows you to be who you want to be in front of anybody.
Pity is a soothing balm that turns toxic. At first, when your family and friends commiserate with you and validate the reasons you have for grumbling about your circumstances, it lands like sympathy. But the more comfort pity brings you, the more external validation you'll crave and the less independent you will become. This will make it that much more difficult for you to gain any traction in life. That's the vicious cycle of pity. It saps self-esteem and inner strength, which makes it harder to succeed. And with each subsequent failure, you will be more tempted to pity yourself. Look, I get it. Life isn't fair or easy. A lot of us are doing a job that we don't want to do. We feel we are above the tasks coming our way and that the world or God or the fates have sentenced us to live in a box we do not belong in. When I was a night shift security guard at a local hospital, I felt that work was beneath me. So I showed up every night with a voice in my head screaming, I don't want to be here. And that infected everything about my life. I ate my feelings, blew up, and slipped into a deep depression. I wanted a different life, but my shitty attitude made it impossible to create one. Every minute you spend feeling sorry for yourself is another minute not getting better. Another morning you miss at the gym. Another evening wasted without studying. Another day burned when you didn't make any progress towards your dreams, ambitions, and deepest desires. The ones you've had in your head and heart your entire life. Every minute you spend feeling sorry for yourself is another minute spent in the dungeon thinking about what you lost or the opportunities that have been snatched away or squandered, which inevitably leads to the Great Depression. When you are depressed, you are likely to believe that nobody understands you or your plight. The only thing that ever matters is the present moment. Yet, too many people let their depression or regret hijack their day. They let their feelings about the past hijack their lives. Perhaps their fiance left them at the altar, or they got fired without cause. Guess what? One day, they will pan back and realize that nobody fucking cared about any of that but them. I don't care what you've been through. I can feel bad for you. I can have sympathy for you, but my sympathy won't get you anywhere. When I was a young, damaged kid, feeling sorry for myself didn't help me. What helped was cleaning those white walls right the first time. We cannot get time back, so we must be minute hoarders. The earlier I get up, the more I do. The less time I stay in pity party, feel sorry for myself land. The stronger I become and the more daylight I see between me and everyone else. When you separate yourself from the pack by cultivating the values and priorities that lead to greatness, mountains of adversity and hardship become speed bumps. And that makes it easier to adapt to the road ahead and build the new life or sense of self you crave. When you adapt, you will begin to see everything that comes your way as a stepping stone on your progression toward a higher plane. High paying, esteemed jobs are generally not entry level. You have to start somewhere, but most people see the thankless tasks that must be completed in order to advance as burdens instead of opportunities. That makes it impossible for them to learn. You gotta find the lesson in every shitty task or low-wage job. That requires humility. I wasn't humble enough to appreciate my experience and security, so my attitude was foul as fuck. I thought I deserved much better, oblivious to the fact that almost everybody starts at the bottom, and from there, it's attitude and action that determine the future. Humility is the antidote to self-pity. It keeps you rooted in reality and your emotions in check. I'm not suggesting you should be satisfied with an entry-level job. I'm never satisfied, but you must appreciate what you have while staying hungry enough to learn everything you can. You need to learn to wash the dishes, flip the burgers, sweat over the deep fryer, sweep up the job site, work in the mailroom, and answer the phones. That's how you build proficiency. It's important to learn every aspect of any business before you move up. You can't rise if you're weighed down by bitterness and entitlement. Humility hardens your spine and encourages you to stand tall, secure in yourself no matter what anyone else thinks. And that has tremendous value.
Get the real talk on Patreon. Join us and elevate your mindset.